Dougie was tweaking his snare a bit, but he'd soon got that sorted. He brought a small kit, snare, floor tom, hi-hat and a crash cymbal. He got to the stage where he could do quite a bit with just those. And the intricate pulse he started on the tom assured us that this was going to be a good one. Are we recording this? Neil asked. I nodded. Turned to my Korg and brought up a sample I'd not used much. It made me nervous. I got it from what was perhaps the last cassette tape recorded by Martin Iceland. It was the noise that, through Martin's son, had given birth to the paintings on the walls of the house where Charlotte had grown up. The noise that had, with those paintings, turned her father into Satan, and in doing so, given birth to the grey shirts. It was the sound of the wind in the branches of Carling Wood. Neil's response was almost tentative. He wouldn't want to try explaining this to the missus, what was going on here. Dave was more reassuring. There was a solidity, a reliability about the pattern he established, meshed with Dougie's more complex pulse. It almost seemed to hold my hand, which I almost seemed to need. And even when both of them joined Neil and Andy in their looser abstractions, I could still feel that pulse. But the sound of that wind across the tracks, around the end of the windbreak, I could just make out the concrete passenger shelter on what was left of the westbound platform. The roof had partly collapsed, and it was a desolate sight by day. By night, you'd not have noticed it if you weren't looking. I was looking. The darkness within was the darkness I'd been seeking. It was a special, final dark, one anyone sane would have fled from. But I wanted it. I wanted it because I knew I had to get through it. I had to get through it because I had to reach. Stopped. Completely. It happened between one of Dougie's beats on the tom and the next. But it was an eternity. And something in the darkness in the collapsed shelter folded in on itself and opened out. And I saw a sitting room in a flat, I thought, because it was on a first or second floor. I knew somehow that it wasn't very far from here, somewhere to the southwest. There were 3 adults and an infant, a tiny baby in a crib. 2 of the adults were in their 20s perhaps, or 30s. It seemed they were a couple. She was slumped in a sofa, apparently unconscious. There was a black halo around her, an aura of terrible depression. The other woman was older. It was hard to work out how old because her face was so set, so rigid, but her hair was grey and her eyes were grey, and she was holding a heavy rolling pin. And there was something wrong with her face, something not quite symmetrical, but this asymmetry did not disguise her resemblance to the man. who stood there as if poised between action and inaction. And I knew him, Tony Grievestick, Warren's father. And I was watching all this from a funny vantage point, as if I was somehow painted onto the headboard of the crib that had the feel of an Aztec temple or a Wicker Man. Horribly, I got the sense of being a god to whom a sacrifice was about to be made, and I could scream all I liked that I wanted no such sacrifice. My devotee could not hear. Suddenly, I knew there were two ways this was going to turn out. And the older woman was standing with the rolling pin. She was Tony's mother, and the tiny baby was Warren, who I'd met in the graveyard, the father of my boy, of my beautiful, beautiful boy. And Tony's mother, carrying that heavy rolling pin, was coming closer to the crib. Janice Croviss. And I knew I hated her. And I knew I existed to destroy her. I knew I must find a way of doing it, even if she was already dead. That bitch, that slag, was the thing that would deny the existence of my beautiful, beautiful boy.